Okay.
Well, Carol Ammon, we have a lot in common, and yet we just met. What we have in common is Central Connecticut State University.
Yes.
And that commonality, while it has different historical time frames, you weren't here, I don't believe, when I started here, is what connects us. And in being in this room with the pictures of the founders back into the 1800s, it connects you and me to tens of thousands of men and women who found this part of their life important, and maybe even were found. In a sense, we're in Founders Hall, discovered. That's what happened to me in college, and that's what I want to ask you to talk about in terms of your experience back here now, thinking back to when you were here as a student in that span of years. But when I started out, I was by all measures ordinary. And I was quite amazed to even have an opportunity to go to Colby College where I did go. But it was someone else who saw me when I was young as a counselor in training who said, you know, you really should go to Colby, and intervened for me because my grades certainly didn't say that. And while there were a lot of things about me that I think were commendable for the day, it was not enough to get to college. In fact, I wasn't even thinking that seriously about going to college. So that was me, and yet once I was there and through those years, out came the teacher you see before you, who I didn't really know wanted to ever be what I have been for almost 45 years. What about your story? You've done so many extraordinary things since you left. How did you start out?
I spent my high school years in New York. Always knew that I would go to college, but never did put a lot of time focusing on it. I had great fun in high school. I played every sport possible, participated in every party possible, but just had a good time, but knew that I would go off to college. I grew up in a family with 3 brothers, so I knew that I'd go to a state institution. I wanted to go away to college, and my guidance counselor recommended Central Connecticut.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I had no reason to know of Central prior to that, because it was the first time that I was out looking for colleges, so my parents took me for a ride up here after we had investigated a little bit about it in the bulletin and materials we received. And as soon as I got on campus, I'm not sure that I can explain it, and I actually took a ride this morning past that, the entrance on Stanley Street to where you come to the first building. I'm trying to recall what that first...
There used to be a lab school, laboratory, elementary school.
Actually, the other direction. 2 buildings to the right.
Loretto Hall?
Which, I'm sorry?
D. Loretto, the first classroom
Yes,
building.
the first classroom building. And I remember coming onto the campus from Stanley Street with my mom and dad and a nice person taking us on a tour of the campus. And I just instantly felt very comfortable here and felt like I belonged. I'm not sure why. And then I subsequently was accepted and started here in September of 1969. And I think I just loved it. I loved the environment. I loved the size of the school. It was not overwhelming. And I think what particularly made my years here significant for me were 2 professors that I had in the chemistry department, Dr. Groth and Dr. Shine. And I think that they really did help me to gain the confidence that I needed to have the program that I was in. I was one of 8 women in the chemistry program, and so it was their, I think, mentoring that helped me feel very comfortable about my time here at Central.
So, in particular, that was a connection to those 2 teachers.
Yes, it was a very strong connection to those teachers, and of course too the campus life. My roommates, we all ended up having a wonderful time together and made a great group of friends. To this day, I'm in touch with several of my roommates.
That's nice.
Yes, and I think that doesn't happen unless you've had a positive experience.
Oh, yeah.
And this experience then became the foundation for the rest of my life and my career. And looking back, I'd say it was a great choice.
No, that's a wonderful story. I've fortunately heard similar stories for many years. I've been here 25. I think if we did lose for some horrible reason the welcomingness of this place, the ease at which people seem to relate to each other, then I would feel very sad, because I think that for whatever reason you're here, you want to feel good every time you step on campus, whether you're a commuter or when you wake up in the morning, just in terms of this is home.
Yes.
And I think so far so good. So it was home for you, and did you know that chemistry was going to be that important to you when you came here, or did it kind of become the major that seemed most likely for you to succeed at the time? Because you've made a lot of good gains with chemistry since.
I did, fortunately, but very interesting. I was very perplexed when I got to college, and then became even more perplexed, because I came here knowing that I wasn't yet sure of what it was that I wanted to pursue in terms of studies. And I assumed I'd get here and have many of the students in the same situation. But it seemed when I got here that everybody knew what they wanted to do and be. And I think some of that was due to the time frame in which I went to college.
Yeah.
I think many of the female students felt that their choices were quite limited.
And this was a teaching college.
And it was a teaching college,
Yeah.
so people seemed to all have that pretty well sewn up in terms of what they wanted to do. So I spent the first year really racking my brain in terms of what I wanted to do. None of the courses I was taking was really telling me I wanted to go into the arts or to literature or whatnot. And then until I started taking some science courses, and I had worked with some counselors that helped me with some aptitude testing, and science seemed to stand out. And then when I met Drs. Groth and Shine, I was actually a minor in chemistry, but they were the most significant people to me. I was a major in biology, and so I declared, I guess, in the second half of my sophomore year, and was very, very comfortable with my choice, and just loved my studies. My only regret is I left here in 3.5 years as opposed to taking the full 4 years, and if I had to do again, I'd probably do it in 5, like today's students are doing.
Well, these days it's kind of hard to rush out to a harsh employment market.
Yes,
but,
absolutely.
And it is a very special period of one's life. Hard to duplicate, particularly after you're of an age where you've started a family and a career. Yet many of our students do come here because we have always, as far as I know, been welcoming to part-time students,
Yes.
working students, and to me it's incredible the way they challenge themselves with so many different responsibilities at the same time, and yet, and from my standpoint, do very well in the class. And maybe that's something else about Central that was there then and is here now, which I guess the simple way of putting it is the work ethic.
Yes.
Yeah, we all enjoy sociability, but I think sort of a hard core of from year to year has been that people come from families that have worked hard to have anything, and when their children come to college, that expectation doesn't go away. You work hard, come home with decent grades, do something that leads to a good job. In a sense of listening to your story, Carol, and thinking, back then the preponderance of people here were going into teaching. Were you not at all attracted to the sort of the clear path of becoming a high school science teacher rather than a liberal arts graduate, without that certainty that you could be certifiably in a job by the time you were 22 or 23?
Teaching, for whatever reason, really was not something I ever gave any consideration to. My mom was a teacher. She was actually,
really?
Yes.
And yet you still went against the grain.
I did, and actually my 5th grade teacher came here when it was the normal school.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and she was from New York as well, so it was an interesting connection, and I liked Miss Chapman a lot. And my mother was a really loved 2nd grade teacher, and to me, I think teaching is really an art, and you can learn what you need to learn, but I think you really need to be able to have a special connection with your audience being
Yep.
the students. And I think unless you felt comfortable that you were going to have that special connection, well, then you should do something different. And so I always felt comfortable understanding things. I didn't think I was ever very good at explaining them. And so I thought that wouldn't make a very good teacher. So
I love that.
so it wasn't really necessarily appealing to me. And I just felt that I would get a liberal arts degree and kind of figure out the rest of it
See
later on.
what the world has to offer.
Right. And talking about the comment you made relative to the work ethic here, I really found that when I came here. So many of the students, parents were participating to the extent that they could in paying the tuition. Many of them were working part-time to have jobs to be able to support the tuition, and that said a lot about the caliber of people that came here. They really came here because they truly wanted that education. Yes. It wasn't because the parents said, just go to college and we'll pay everything. So it was something that people really wanted, and I think that was significant in many people getting a great education because you worked hard for it.
Connected to that, and over these years that you have achieved the opportunity and responsibility to be an employer, do you look for similar qualities in the people upon whom you placed your trust, or did when you were running the company, and even now? I mean, is there something, because I think that is what we bring out from Central. We bring out knowledge, intellect, but we bring out what I like to call a sterling trustworthiness. And so I guess I'm feeding you an easy line. You can't say no, that you don't want to hire trustworthy people, but I am asking in the years that you've had to assess who you're going to choose to work with you and who you wouldn't, is there something there that matters most to you?
Oh, I think most definitely, and I think certainly trustworthiness is up at the top of the list, because trustworthiness presumes so many other qualities about people, the integrity and the sense of ethics and morality and such, so that really contains so many different things. But I was very fortunate in being able to start a company from scratch, and the reason I say that, as opposed to taking over a company that's been built, is you really can take out a fresh sheet of paper and build a culture.
Choose the people you wish.
Absolutely, and we had a very interesting process. I had asked 2 people to join me in starting this business, and on day 1 there was 3 of us, and then we became 28, and then 65, and eventually over 1,000. But in the very beginning, it was a very interesting time. We said, this is the culture that we want. And on top of the list was respect for employees, respect for each other. Because we felt if we could build a company on the foundation of respect, that everybody's special, everybody has special needs, everybody needs to listen and care about each other. That was one of the things, and I always felt that I came to school in a very respectful environment.
Yes.
And I did, and
yes.
To have two mentors mentoring, one of only 8 females in the class, said to me, they already got the picture of diversity. They understood it. They respected me as a serious student, not just as a whimsical, oh, here we have a girl in the chemistry class. So there was a foundation of respect.
So you wanted to bring that right
here.
Straight into your first business.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the other thing was, which I really developed here, was passion. I was a very passionate student. I really loved being here. I loved spending my time in the library as much as I spent with my colleagues having fun, going to football games. But I was a very passionate student, and my feeling is if you can't be passionate with what you do, you will not be successful. You have to have that fire in your belly that makes you want to go to work each day or come to school each day. And for our business, it was really about making a difference in people's lives that were suffering from pain. And so we said, these are the things, the characteristics that we want our employees to be able to embrace. And our first interview was not about the skills that they brought to the table. It was about the culture and explaining the culture in great detail and understanding if we felt that was a fit. If people passed that test, then they were able to come back for an interview about their skills.
Wow.
Because we said there's plenty of people out there that can really do well in the job. But there's only so many people that are going to be that great fit from a culture perspective. And so I think a lot of the early learnings I had in college shaped me as a person, and then I brought that into the workplace. And I had many years in a corporate environment as well, so I could decide what are the things I don't want to bring, and just bring the things that I felt would make a positive work environment.
this is exactly what I want our students to be hearing, Carol. That's why I'll be using this and let you know after, while I'm using it. Because there's so, in my field in management, there's probably more written about leadership and management than almost every other subject combined. It's just an enormous body of people offering their opinion, and sometimes based on science, but mostly based on, just our interpretation of the world. And we're constantly telling them you have to have passion. But it's hard to put into a book or onto a film or anything else. What is it? What's passion? How does that fit into business? Because passion, they can see it in forming a company to put on a play or something in the arts, but passion in business. And sometimes the people like you who have achieved so much use that term, but it doesn't have the same authenticity. So when you said passion, I saw it in your eyes. Could you talk about how you discovered that passionate way of being here, or you had it, but we didn't discourage it, and then you took it out into business. How do you sustain it, even to this day? What keeps you excited about contributing?
I think there's many things, but I think my early learnings here, again, as I said earlier, being able to fit into a program that was not mainstream. All of my colleagues were going into teaching.
That's right.
I had very few female colleagues in my biology classes or in my chemistry classes. And that feeling of acceptance that I had from my professors, making me feel very credible as a credible player, I think got me even more excited about what I was learning. And so then taking that passion into the workplace. And I think, too, it's interesting. I started in the workplace in a time where the world was changing so dramatically, and there weren't as
Vietnam,
absolutely
rioting, all of that.
That's right. Yeah. Women coming more mainstream into the workplace, diversity being more of an important factor in the
Even
workplace.
Even the ERA, you remember that discussion?
Absolutely, absolutely.
How could you forget?
Absolutely, and many. I talk a little bit about the fact that your career has many parallels to the roadways. It's the highway of life and the choices that you make and everything. And early in my career, there were lots of signs that said, do not enter, caution, or proceed with caution, because there just weren't a lot of opportunities.
Men at work,
for women.
I think.
Men at work was a very appropriate sign, yes. And a dangerous curve ahead. Maybe I was the dangerous curve, I don't know, in my younger days. But nevertheless, I think that I had to dig deep and really become passionate about everything that I was learning. I said early on, if I'm going to succeed in this business, if I'm going to get an opportunity to run a business for a big company, I didn't know I'd do my own company at that point, then I have to really know as much about this business at all levels as I can, and be better at it than most if I'm going to get that opportunity. So I just became very excited about learning, and I think, where was I most excited about learning? It was here at Central. It started very early, and then it continued into the workplace. And after about 5 years, I realized that was a very good strategy. Maybe it was good that the jobs weren't open so readily, because I got a foundation that gave me the opportunity, when I finally could start a business, to know so many aspects of the business.
So even when you were in that business, you had a different dream, but you saw that as a pathway toward your dream. So you took every possible learning opportunity while you were out there in your first job.
I took many lateral moves. I moved to Kansas from New York City as a single woman in my early 30s. Now, that took some passion to be willing to do that.
Even though Dorothy wanted to go home to Kansas, perhaps that was pretty much a stretch for a New Yorker.
Well,
New Britain itself is kind of in the country, isn't it?
Yes, but Kansas had some of the nicest people in the world. It turned out to be a good move. It did. But so then when I started my company as well, I knew that to be successful in the space that I was participating in, it was specialty pharmaceuticals. It was a little bit novel at the time. We were going into an area to try to create new pain medications. It was an underserved market, so, and we knew that it would be difficult. We had old products, we had to try to create new products out of them, build a pipeline, gain credibility with competitors so we could in-license products. And my feeling was that we had a very good chance at success, but we really could be successful if we hired the right team of people. And I was very fortunate. The financial people that I ended up going with, and we had a couple of offers from different equity houses, actually were started their company as an ESOP, an employee-owned stock ownership program. So when I said to them, I want the equity that we receive to go to every employee, so that if we're successful, every employee is successful, because they are going to own a piece of the pie, because they will make it successful.
Well, that was pretty unusual back then. There were only a few, Lincoln Electric, and a few just very odd experiments in actually believing human beings want to be part owners of the business that they're giving their lives to. You know, what a wild concept.
Yeah, I know.
But it was just the right concept.
Well, and it worked really well for us, because we only did it because it was the right thing to do. We didn't do it because we felt that we'd get something special out of it. But the other thing was, we knew we needed experienced people. So we had to hire people away from companies where they had pension plans and they were well situated, and they were going to be taking a big risk. So we felt that it was the right thing to do.
And you remember the first person you attracted that was a big win for you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, several of them. The team of scientists we were able to attract from our old company, they were so excited about coming, because they really felt that, and rightly so, the assets that they worked on were not valued by the corporation any longer, hence why they sold them. And so they felt that they weren't really part of a team anymore, and they had an opportunity to come and be there at the ground floor and help to develop this company. And the people we hired really cared, and all had stories about people they knew that suffered from pain.
There you go.
So
there's passion again.
It's passion. So they really wanted to make this company successful, bring new pain products to market. And there was one product we brought to market, and an elderly man came to our office to thank us because his wife was able to get out of bed after she was relieved from pain. People were just, that was so incredible in terms of an experience for the people, and just the passion is rewarded by knowing that there's people that aren't suffering anymore. So passion is so important. It really is.
You know, there are those of the current generation who, according to research, have a very high profile of interest in making a difference in social responsibility, which I say, yay. Yes. My generation, our generation, the Kennedy generation, was somewhat inspired. But what we were seeing back then, I'm projecting, but again, why it was so wonderful that you chose business. We thought government and or nonprofit service was the higher ground.
Yes.
And that business basically was essentially chasing profit to the extent that we had to deal with socially with the damage that business was doing. And this was years ago. And now today I'm a business professor, even though I started out in social service. And I'm trying to say, as well as I can, that there is a choice within business to do an extraordinary good. And it's not counter to being profitable or by any other measure that's typical of business. You can and should use the opportunity of business because it's a different way of accomplishing something in life than through government and or through nonprofit social services. And you've demonstrated that relieving pain. I can't imagine a government agency that would invent a compound to relieve pain. It's not in the cards for them. So you have ennobled business. You've made business matter in the lives of that gentleman and his wife and so many others. Could you give me I'm giving you a speech. Could you give me a little speech about how we can continue to make sure that our young people see that a life in business doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do harm, but they can actually do good and be in business?
I think it's very possible, and I think it really is incumbent upon businesses to really always have that social hat on and to really understand as a corporation what is it that they're trying to achieve from the standpoint of taking care of the citizens of our country and of the world for that matter. And so there has to be a stated purpose in the businesses, and the leaders of those businesses, I think, have to constantly be singing that song and doing things in the community that really do support that stated mission.
Put their feet on the ground, walk the talk.
You have to, because no matter what your business, and some businesses, pharmaceuticals, it's easy. Yes, I want to cure the world. I want to take all these.
It seems obvious.
Right, all these suffering people. Well, so if you're making railroad tracks, well, it doesn't matter what business you're in. I think the profitability is your avenue for being able to give some of that back to society. And so it's the business's responsibility to choose to make an environment where people feel socially responsible, where they get days off to go help people, to make a difference. And it's so easy to do that in a corporate environment, but it has to start from the top. And we did that. We gave people days off to go work in their community. We matched giving up to a certain level from a social perspective. So we were constantly talking about that. I served, while I was CEO, on not-for-profit boards, did work at the hospital, and I made sure people knew what was important to me and what was I going to do if I was able to get some wealth from the business. Because I've been at lectures before where some young student will say, well, it's terrible, you're selling these drugs at such a high price and you're making money. And I said, well, yes, we do live in a capitalistic society, and profit is okay. Profit is not wrong. It is okay. It's absolutely okay, and actually it's essential to being able to take care of our citizens in this country so that people can work, they can pay taxes, so children can go to high school, get educations, and so that we can now hopefully take care of people from a healthcare perspective. So profit is very important. That's why we exist as corporations and employ people that can pay those taxes and take care of our social responsibilities. But it's what you do with that profit, and especially as a leader of an organization, what do you do with that pile of money if you got very lucky? And you know, my feeling is I'm a custodian of that pile of money, and my job is to give it back. And maybe it's all before I die, maybe it's through a foundation that lives on after I die, but I'm just a custodian of it. Yes, I probably live a little bit better than I used to, but most of that goes back to make a difference because I got it. I got it running a corporation that was trying to do the right thing for people. Well, wouldn't it be wrong if I didn't continue to do that?
Wow, I'm awestruck.
Well, it's the right thing to do. It really is, and that's kind of why I think that, it sounds funny, but I think I was successful for a reason, because I have the right mindset about what my social responsibility is. And I look at, isn't it surreal and isn't it wonderful that I ended up with a bag of money to give back to people?
Yeah.
And how lucky is that? I mean, it doesn't get much better.
For a lovely young woman from New York who stopped at De Loretto Hall, 1969, did you say?
Yes.
And looked around and said, this place is pretty nice. I think I might like it here.
Yes, absolutely.
Now that's our luck. That's
Thank you.
definitely our luck. You have dignified our name, Carol Ammon. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Cut.